Okay, so I'm going to be talking about book two, Hachi and Araine Nightmares. Again, for those who, I guess, I don't know why you would listen to this if you hadn't listened to the first two, but spoiler warning, there's going to be spoilers. I'm just talking through um, basically the three parts and what my thinking was behind doing what I did in each of these. So, yeah, without any more spoiler warnings, you have been warned. Okay, so book two starts right after the events of book one. There's no time jumps or anything. This was intentional. The first book had taken me about a year to write. By the time I was done editing it, I felt like I had kind of found my groove as far as writing and things were going. So I had, started on book two. Book two overall, I think, took about maybe 6 months or so for me to get the initial draft out. So quite a quite a half the amount of time as the first book. At least for the initial draft, and then sometime after that was when I actually went back and edited it and rewrote a bunch of stuff. But but we start off right after the events of book one, and keeping with the dream concepts that I've been going with. I started with daydream. Daydream because I was throwing a lot at the reader in that first part. The pacing is really fast. I felt where the first book when you're starting with lucid and the other parts all kind of ease you into things. This kind of assumes you remember everything you read in book one, and it just pushes you right into the story. So it can be really fast if you were someone who took the books just came out. But if you were someone who like read the first book and then we're going to wait a few months before reading the second book for some reason, or because you're busy or whatever, it could be one of those things where you might be like, oh, what the fuck happened in that first one? So this assumes you're reading them kind of back to back. And part of that is just because that's the way I tend to read books. I like to wait for an entire series to be out and then I'll read them back to back. But I do understand that that is not something that people always do. But yeah, so anyway, daydream, daydreams are typically short. They can happen while you're awake. And so again, it was this, a lot of things being thrown. You're learning where Hachi and Lamont are. She's been sent by Amrita, aka the Founders Incarnate, on a specific mission to recover remaining Tau born vaults, and whatever is inside of them to retrieve those things. Why, we're not told, but again, the Tau born have to kind of obey the Founders. They don't really have a choice, which kind of comes up again later on as well. Lamont is instructed to stay on Planet Nine and help the humans with their efforts there. They are focusing on building a sling gate. It is the technology used to propel them quickly through space to get from point A to point B when things are aligned correctly. And then also we kick off pretty fast with, meeting some new characters. So we meet Gemini. Originally when I was trying to write Gemini, I was kind of thinking of, a little bit of cyberpunk type of influence, but also, I wanted a character who, I wanted I knew I wanted his speech to kind of be annoying. And I had actually rewritten a lot of his dialogue, and then I was kind of going for that annoying kind of, Southern California surfer speak, like is every other word. And yeah, and so, it was one of those things where I just thought it would be kind of funny to have people on Jupiter who talked like Californians, especially and overuse the word like. I know people can find that voice frustrating, as you should. So that is what it was. And he is the techno. I say he, just simply because when I originally wrote him, he was he was basically a gay 20-something-year-old, and then over time that kind of changed. His character, I was just kind of thinking through all the things that they'd gone through, and I ended up, also, just because I already had characters who, kind of, not that I wanted to like do check boxes for like, oh, I want one of every kind of character in here, but I just kind of felt like, I really wanted a character who was, more androgynous and kind of had elements of both sexes to them. And so I had rewritten them as a they, them, and kind of, they'd already had the body augments, when I first drafted them out. And when I first started trying to, generate some artwork around it and kind of doing some sketches and then taking that into Mid-Journey and having it, redo my drawings and then taking that back into Photoshop to do some stuff, because, it was already one of those things where, it just made sense to have them as a they, them. And so, yeah, so we kick off with a bunch of activity going on. We have Hachi. So Hachi meets a new character. There's a whole, bloodbath at the Syndicate Tower, basically. And then from there, we find a Tau-born vault, and then we immediately are thrust into basically my version of a Dogma's movie world scene where, like in Dogma, there was the scene where they decide to kill all the people at movie world because they're horrible beings. Definitely kind of had that thought in my mind as I was writing the scene where Hachi and Araine are invited by these people, these powerful corporate entities, who want to, one, kind of, fuck with them, and two, ultimately, they were going to try and kill them. And obviously that does not go according to their plan. And so, Hachi pretty much, destroys them. And again, we learn that there's a new space power that she's been granted. And then again, we have the ending with Luna Light for that first daydream part, which kind of sets up the stage for the next things. Recurring is where we go to. Recurring dreams, obviously dreams that you tend to have frequently, or at least your mind tells you you're having them frequently. And so, it's in this section, we're kind of going through some of the same challenges that she'd faced before, where she's not really sure how to do what she wants to do or how to get to where she needs to get to. The decisions she's making are just kind of, she'll try and come up with a plan, and the plan doesn't, there's just no reason for it, or it just fails. And so, we kind of start to see a little bit more of, no matter how she thinks about doing things, how well she plans things, like there's always going to be a problem with it that was something that she just couldn't account for. And that's just kind of part of life, right? And sometimes you think you're doing something good, but you're actually not. We saw in the scene where, Gemini basically uses, space Wi-Fi to upload a virus to the enemy ships, disabling them. And, because of that, another faction within the book decides to, fight against them. And then while Hachi is going about her business, she learns that, oh shit, there's this whole other battle going on, which was kind of my fault, and I should probably do something about that. The other thing with recurring is it does end a little differently than the other sections. So this one kind of, I think actually when I originally wrote it, I had actually ended it with Myra's chapter, and then the chapter 42 where Sarah is brought back was actually going to be the start of Nightmares. I ended up changing that just because at the time reasons I wanted 42 to kind of abruptly end recurring and usher you into Nightmares, with Mira then kind of being the, oh, like shit, there's something is about to happen kind of thing. So 42, that's probably, depending on who the reader is, that could be a little bit, one of the more darker chapters. There's a lot of suicide in that, mostly because as Sarah is, they're attempting to clone Sarah. Typically in this universe, people clone themselves all the time, but there is a expiration shelf life, if you will, on how long you can go for a successful cloning transplant. So if you're moving from one body to another body, you only have a limited amount of time to do that. And then of course it doesn't always take, even then it's not guaranteed. And so some of the things that can happen are typically a severe psychosis and people going crazy and unfortunately killing themselves. And that's what you see in 42. So it takes 42 attempts to actually get her revived. That sets up for Nightmares, which is the second book's name, of course, kind of following suit with, the last thing Hachi says is the chapter title. The last part 3 section is the name of the book. Pretty consistent with how I go about things. Again, I do plot a lot of things, so I work on outlines and then I kind of flesh those out. And so I have a very strict kind of, each section is 10 chapters. each chapter is, 4 to 5 pages or so. So we go into Nightmares. We start off with Myra, and this is really going to be the last time the reader is going to hear her thoughts and also kind of get insight into that, because we go back to Hachi, and again it's her story. We meet the old woman again, who actually did survive the getting her face blown off in book 1. And again, Hachi's reaction to that woman who is unnamed, her rage kind of takes over, and again she just massacres a lot of folks, and then we get to see Amrita's response. And at this point in the story, Amrita had still been struggling with the fact that she is not really a person. Like she thought she was a human, and there were times when she was very much aware of what she was doing, but there were a lot of times throughout her entire life where she would lose time. She would lose hours, days, weeks, months, however much time, where she had been doing other things, and apparently changing things as big as, your major in college, or what classes you're taking in college, what job you're doing, where you're going to work, all these different things where, one day she'd be going, to some place, and then, she'd wake up and she would be, completely somewhere else. And it would be days or weeks later. And so all of this has kind of put her strain on her, and she can't really function. And when she sees Hachi, just going on again, just a massacre of people, she just, loses it. And the human elements of her just can't just really don't understand. And unfortunately, she, takes her life, although not quite in the way of death, since she is actually the embodiment of the founders in the soul system. So while the founders, for whatever reason, are unable to leave Tau, they have basically placed themselves within her as their vessel. And so when she does take her life, basically what happens is her mind is merged with the founders, and so they're able to commune, and then from there she's actually able to function and operate as both, herself. Although from there on out, she will always refer to herself as a we, or talk about us when referring to herself. She's no longer singular when she refers to herself. Because again, it is a different entity, although she's part of those entities now within her. And so, yeah, so from there, we go on to, Hachi learns of the fact through Amrita that Mira and Lamont have passed. They died. We're only given a little bit of information on that in this book. There's a recording as they're heading back to Planet Nine, which is basically, it's Lamont's recording, but it's from Hachi's viewpoint, since the recording was partially destroyed. So it's Hachi and Araine are listening to it and trying to make sense of things, and trying to understand what happened. And yeah, it's one of those things where, Hachi's just, again, she's feeling kind of lost. She's feeling very defeated. She's, she went and got all these Tau-born vault treasure things, and, now, isn't going to go back to her lover. She's not going to go back to Tau. She no longer has Sarah. It's just Hachi and Araine, and that's it. And all these different things. And she's feeling like a failure, until she gets back to Planet Nine. And then she finds out, and again, the book ends with Sarah saying, "Hello, Hachi," because Lamont had been successful in actually cloning Sarah. So again, like book two, it moves really fast. There's a lot of things that I threw in there very quickly. Surprisingly, because it is slightly shorter than the first book, which I think spends, obviously more time on kind of building some of like the background world setting stuff and factions and stuff like that. But book two, again, kind of assumes like, everything that happened in book one. You had just finished reading that. And so you're thrust into more of a fast paced action thing. So, yeah, so that's me rambling again here. So thanks for listening, and I will be doing book three next, and then after that, might talk more about what's next and stuff. But thanks for listening, and I'll talk at you in the next one.